Hey Pete, lovely to see you. Of course, one of the high rollers when it comes to Windows integration with MIDI and Microsoft and the whole MIDI Association too. Great to catch up. So what's going on?
So we're doing a bunch of stuff here with the MIDI Association. And by the way, Nick, great to see you again as well. So sorry.
Always welcome.
We're doing a bunch of interesting things with the MIDI Association this year. We've got probably the biggest thing that we're introducing at this Namm show is Network MIDI 2.0. And Network MIDI 2.0 is a specification that passed this past fall. And now has some implementations out there. Selfishly, I'm going to show you there's a Windows implementation, which I'm pretty proud of, which gives you all the greatness of MIDI 2.0 and MIDI 1.0, but without cable length limitations. Works over Wi-Fi, works over 100-meter cables, etc.
So I'm familiar with that because RTP MIDI is kind of built into Mac OS.
Yeah.
Sort of, although they broke it. And then, but Windows, you used to have to run a sort of separate little app, but it's really powerful. I mean, we use it in the Sonic office.
RTP MIDI is still great and was great. It was never an official MIDI Association standard. It's just like you said, Apple created that originally, but it is only for MIDI 1.0.
Right.
And we wanted a transport that was going to work for MIDI 2.0. And actually, this transport is so much simpler to create because for folks who are developers in your audience, the RTP specification has a lot of other stuff that you have to do for all the real-time audio that's not needed for MIDI. So like this is a much more stripped down, simpler, efficient implementation. And so what we have here is, here's an iPad application called Music Kraken. And it's the person who created this did a simple implementation of Network MIDI 2.0 directly in the app. They didn't need any OS support or anything. So they built that directly into their application. And it's talking to this Windows PC right here. There's the display for it. And I have an implementation of Network MIDI 2.0 in the OS for Windows here. And we're able to control this application. Like I can set this to record. This is Multitrack Studio. So I have this tiny mouse here. If I set that to record and start going, I can control that from the iPad. And we see we're getting note information and stuff on there.
And this is going over the network wires, right?
Yeah. And this is, sorry, we have a whole concert going on right here next to us. And so the way this is working here, because you don't do Wi-Fi on the show floor at Namm, as you know, so this is going all directly over wired cables. So this is connected to this BomeBox, which is just acting as a router, and that talks to MIDI 2.0 on the PC. This is another MIDI 2.0, Network MIDI 2.0 device called the KissBox, and then this is a Network MIDI 2.0 device called the BomeBox. And what these two devices do is you can take your MIDI 1.0 device and put it on the other side of a stage or put it on the other side of your room even, and you're not limited by the cable length limitations that you have today with USB.
Right. Yeah, well, we did some demos with RTP MIDI. Yep. I mean, you can go WAN with that stuff. Yes. I think I did a demo with Matt where I was playing stuff and he was in, a few hundred miles away, and it works. I mean, you do get obviously some latency in there. Is there specific latency compensation that implemented in your code or in the?
So I didn't catch the last part there.
Is there specific latency compensation in the?
Oh yeah. So this actually over this we didn't even need latency compensation for what we're doing because it's less than 1/3 of a millisecond latency from one device to another.
So it's better than MIDI ports, basically.
Yeah. So it's in MIDI 1.0 it takes a full millisecond to send a single note on message. So this is already doing better than that. We're obviously looking for places to optimize. There's also the jitter reduction that we can do and everything else. But this is already really, really performing really well.
And how is it for stuff like MTC and like real-time, ongoing
so
stuff?
You can send clock messages through it just over MIDI. And again, understanding that over 100-meter cable, you're going to get still under a millisecond of latency, but there is a tiny bit of latency there, just like there was with a MIDI 1.0, like long DIN cable that
but also you're not having to go through the optical coupling business, which is going to introduce. I mean, what did they say? Original MIDI was somewhere between 10 and 15 milliseconds on old kind of school MIDI devices, just in hardware, right?
And so this is much faster than that, much more flexible. And one of the things that people wanted with MIDI 2.0 is, how do I connect two devices together? Because there's the USB approach, which really only works well for device to a computer. They said, well, what's the replacement for DIN? This is the replacement for DIN. We're looking
network,
at
and it's infrastructure most people have got already.
And most microcontrollers that are used in synthesizers these days have the ability to have an Ethernet connection to them, so it'll just work.
And so you're not using Wi-Fi here, but is that viable?
Yes. So in my tests, like in my house, actually, I did Wi-Fi between two computers as well as to my network, and I was still getting under a third of a millisecond latency. But Wi-Fi is one of those things. The further away you are, the longer it's gonna, the more latency you'll have.
Yeah, absolutely. A shout out to the BomeBox as well. We use Bome's MIDI translator, which is a great piece of software. And that's,
all
over
the
there.
Stuff. So the BomeBox was. It was absolutely incredible for testing here for Windows, because that Florian had implemented that before I really started working on our stack. Without that, I wouldn't have been able to develop anything here. And Florian actually led the development in the working group for the MIDI Association for creating Network MIDI 2.0.
Nice.
Okay.
So is this baked in yet to Windows 11, or where?
No, so this is available in preview. We'll talk a bit more about MIDI and Windows separately, but this is available in preview now today on our GitHub, but it will be baked into Windows later this year.
And how do people get hold of that stuff? Do they have to? Do they join the MIDI Association, or is there a developer account? Or
it's an open public standard now, and all the stuff that we have from Microsoft is available for free on GitHub. We're actually putting everything into the Windows Insider builds next month. So the first or second week of February, people who aren't software developers will be able to still try some things out.
Right.
There are a couple other things I wanted to show you here while we're here.
Yeah,
right. So another one is the piano profile, which is a big part of MIDI 2.0, where you can have a device that says, hey, I'm a piano, and here are my velocity curves, here are my pedal curves, everything. And you can have that configured so that when you record on one and you play back with another, or you have two different people using two different piano devices, you can get comparable performances, which you can't really do very well today.
Oh, interesting, right? Okay.
And then if we want to run over here, if we want to look at straight up MIDI 2.0 over USB, the Yamaha Montage has it fully built in. Also, the Waldorf Iridium now has MIDI 2.0. If you go over there and talk to them over USB as well, they've been doing some fantastic work there. And here we're showing the MIDI 2.0 USB devices, both with Mac OS and Windows.
And is that with full QI and stuff like that?
Full.
Is it the query that where it could say it announces and can be?
So this one is the query one, where it's showing it with the new Korg synth. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Multipoly? No.
Yes, multipoly.
Yeah.
So there's the software multipoly with the key stage.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, because the key stage does have QI. Yes, I remember.
Yeah,
that.
and this is a fantastic controller, and it understands the profiles and property exchange part of MIDI 2.0, and that's how it's able to control the multipoly software.
Right, okay, so things are moving on. I mean, because when we first started talking, it felt very glacial.
Yes.
So do you think, is the pace picking up now?
Absolutely. I mean, there are still companies that are waiting for us to get us being Microsoft, get our stuff in box, because then everybody is covered. Apple's had their implementation in their operating system for a while. Ours will be in starting next month. But we're seeing more and more devices coming out now, and especially that Network MIDI has been announced.
And is there, you may not know this, but is there like a hardware overhead for people who are designing it in their hardware? Do they have to kind of have more, I don't know, DSP or chip or software abilities to run, or is it a pretty no?
So if I heard you correctly, you're asking, is there a way for like the hardware and software developers to implement this without having to do everything from scratch? Is that
no, I think what I was meaning was if I was making a synthesizer and I wanted MIDI 2 capabilities, what would be the overhead, the manufacturer cost overhead? Is there like do I have to put like big chips in, or Do I need more DSP or whatever?
For the most part, most synthesizers now have CPUs in them that are powerful enough to do this without any problems. It is more than MIDI 1.0. MIDI 1.0 was designed for synths as they existed in 1983. They've come a long way since then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? So unless you're building the world's cheapest devices, there's really not much overhead for this at all. And there's plenty of open source that people can use to start from for this.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pete.